What's up, Benchwarmers? Welcome into a very special edition of the Far End of the Bench podcast. We just had the debut of our new series as Nico's taken a little bit of a break, a step back to focus on his day job because he's got a day job that matters. Good on him being 24 and having a job that he actually cares about. But not to fear, along with the Red and the Pine debut, I am back on this special bonus Friday edition with a special guest that came on very last minute. So I appreciate that. Peter Andrisani of the PTV Sports Network. You can find them on YouTube and Twitter. YouTube, PTV Sports Network, Twitter at PTV Sports Posts. But Peter, thank you very much for coming on last minute. I'm looking forward to this. We were talking a little bit before we started recording. It sounds like we got a lot of similar interest in sports, and we're relatively the same age. So this is going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, man, I can't wait. Thank you again for having me on. You were the first one really to get back to me when I post, because, actually it's funny that you mentioned your co-host, took time off to focus on his day job. And I actually just started a new job a couple weeks ago, and it's been very time consuming. And I had like time constraints on podcasts and YouTube episodes as it was. So now I was also working like nights. So it was kind of weird. Now I'm working days. So now it's even more difficult to kind of find that happy medium. But now I'm finally getting back to it, and thanks for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
It's obviously I know that the Twitter community that we've followed each other for a while. We haven't really interacted, but I was just randomly scrolling through. I'm blessed with the fact that I get to be on a computer most of the day while I'm at work. So I saw that post and I was like, well, yeah, I'm kind of looking for ideas to fill some content spots. I don't necessarily want our feed to go quiet because we're kind of planning on a return to our normal episodes for March Madness. So we wanted to get something going, and I was like, wow, what are the chances that somebody's going to be reaching out? Like, you want collaboration? I'll be down. I was like, yeah, I like your page. I've listened to a few of your episodes. I really enjoy the content that you put out. I was just listening to your debacle of trying to get back to New York from Florida I think your most recent episode. So that was a lot of fun to listen to. And I was like, yeah, let's go ahead and link up. He's from New York. So obviously we can bond over the fact that we both love the Yankees, and I'll be there. I'm used to being a shoulder to cry on for Jets fans of our show. Know that my brother's a big Jets fan. So I'll be here for support as well. But just real quickly, kind of tell our listeners, people that haven't listened to your show before, what the PTV Sports Network is and kind of how you started that and what you're kind of doing with that platform.
So it initially started, we just passed our 2-year anniversary at the beginning of January. So it initially started out as a different name with one of my buddies. And it was just it was more like a YouTube entity. So we would just go to a professional studio, actually, and we were recording a bunch of things like in advance and then just chopping it up and putting it on YouTube. And then, he was still in college at the time, so it just didn't really work out. And I was having a lot of fun with it because, it was getting some decent engagement, and like, I don't know, you get to live out like a little mini dream. So I was like, I don't want to let it die. It's just a hobby, really. So, be that as it may. And then as time went on and as I learned how to make content and learned how to make podcast episodes, things started rolling, and things are knock on wood, getting a lot more successful now. So that's really cool. But the YouTube channel and the podcast are really two separate entities. The podcast is just kind of like where I go on to just rant, talk with my friends, talk about what's going on. Baseball, football, all that kind of stuff. I do a pick'em podcast for now 18 weeks of the NFL season. So now that, that kind of dried up, I've been having a lot of my friends on, just shooting the shit, just really talking and having good conversations. But the YouTube channel is really a lot of subjective content. Recently, because of the whole unfortunate, things going on with the MLB and the labor situation, the lockout, I haven't really been able to post anything about baseball because nothing's going on. So I've been occupying my time with a bunch of NFL draft content. So like a few months ago, I just said to myself, I'm like, you know what? It would really be a good idea to get myself out there and try and hit every single NFL fan base. So I'm going to be crazy and I'm going to make a 7-round mock draft for every single NFL football team. So I'm actually up to number, I have to, after we're done tonight, I have to record the 23rd one. So I'm almost there. Sort of, kind of.
You're a brave soul. I mean, that's an ambitious goal to start off with, for sure. You got to be like happy for people like Les Snead that are just, screw the draft. I don't need it. We draft picks. Who cares? I'll buy somebody in free agency. We got the pocketbook.
Yeah. I haven't even done the Rams yet because there's just nothing to pick from. I looked at they got like 7 picks and like 4 of them are 7th rounders. So there's really nothing that they could do this year.
Right. No, obviously, as speaking of a rebrand, it's fitting because before this show was the far end of the bench, I was the one who initially started. It was called Center of Attention at that point. I played center in college. So I was finally stepping behind a microphone. I had done like radio broadcasting. So that is also a kind of serendipitous connection between our two platforms. But when you were going through that initial change, were you always interested in maybe like getting a platform to talk about sports? Were you more just a guy that would get together with friends and have debates, and then decided to put it out on recordings? Was this kind of a plan, or did this happen and you just kind of stumbled and kept going along with it?
So the way that it actually like started at the beginning was I proposed the idea to like a couple of my friends where I was like, hey man, like we should start a YouTube channel because we always have great like sports conversations. And I know that people like to just listen to people talk. Like it's just a thing, especially about sports. And a lot of my friends were like, it's kind of a stupid idea. Like, I don't think anyone's really going to listen to it. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. And then my buddy that I actually started it with was, I don't know if you know Iona College, but it's up in New Rochelle in New York. And he went there for communications major. So he called me one day to talk about the playoffs that were coming up in 2019 going to 2020 for the NFL. And we were talking about the Bills against the Texans. And I literally said to him, I was like, yeah, like I actually just talked to a couple of my other friends. They said it was a stupid idea. And he's like, bro, that I go to college for communications. He was like, let's hop in the studio. Like I could book us a time and let's get in there. And I was like, all right, what the hell? And then immediately, like when you have an idea and then actually you take steps towards like that idea coming to fruition. Yeah, I was like,
nothing stands in the way of doing it. Yeah.
That's when I was like, oh, I don't know. It's too good to be true. I was like, it's going too fast, but we got in there, we hopped in the studio. It was a tremendous time. I felt like completely natural behind the mic, which was something I was worried about. Mm-hmm. And then it just took off from there. And like I said, I wish that he could still do it with me. We had such a good dynamic. I actually had him on a couple episodes ago to celebrate the 100th episode of my podcast, but he just can't do it. He's got a full-time job now as well during the day. It just wouldn't work out, but it was a great time while we were together. But I creatively, like we kind of hit a wall. And then once he left, I was like, should I continue this or not? And then I started really getting more on the YouTube side and then creating like YouTube videos. And that's when I saw like the exponential growth. And I was like, all right, like if people are enjoying what I'm going to say, then I'll keep making stuff and see what happens. And it's been working out well so far. So.
Yeah, obviously I've seen your stuff all around your social media, and being a fellow, independent podcaster creator in the space, you keep tabs on other shows that you kind of feel like you'd enjoy. And there's been a few people throughout our time where we've really started to grow on Twitter where you're like, yep, we pretty much talk about the same things, have similar takes, have some that we probably won't agree on at all. But that's funny to go back to your, starting your show and the similar, like when Nico and I started, he was the more marketing and I was the communications major. So I was the one sitting in a college radio station, like, I know all of this stuff. What am I going to use it for? So it's kind of, as we continue to unravel this, I'm sure we'll have more and more similarities that come through. You're born and raised in New York. So I mentioned your Yankees Sure. affiliation, your Jets affiliation. We apologize. So sorry for that. But what has kind of been, your thoughts since the Super Bowl has ended, and you will actually also, I'll flip this around and you'll be the interviewer at some point, but just initially the Rams, Matthew Stafford winning a Super Bowl, pretty much cementing a Hall of Fame career, initial takeaways from Super Bowl 56.
So I'll give you a quick backstory. I always thought, and anyone who's ever listened to the early stuff of my podcast knows that I've been a thorough Matthew Stafford apologist for his entire career. I always thought that the guy was a tremendous talent and he was just being wasted by the fact that he played in Detroit. And, he's kind of I don't want to say an obsolete type of quarterback, but that gunslinger type of almost no mobility quarterback doesn't really work in the NFL anymore. So a lot of people were thinking, this guy, he's mediocre. That's all he's ever going to be. Never won a playoff game, all that kind of stuff. And I was super excited for him to get there because I was like, wow, this guy really deserves it. And then on the other hand, my favorite player to watch, well, basically this year and then for some of last year was Joe Burrow. I've always loved Joe Burrow, since he really came on the scene. What was that, 2019?
When 2019 was his LSU run.
When he came on the scene with the 60 touchdowns and, the championship and everything. He was just such a cool guy. You just wanted to root for him because he just oozed that type of confidence. And that, he was just a winner. Whether you liked it or not, he was probably going to win. Sorry. And and then, they got to the Super Bowl and I was like, I really don't know who I want to win. But me being a New Yorker, we stereotypically don't really like Los Angeles. Yeah. So I was like, I'd rather see Cincinnati win, but I wasn't going to hate the fact that LA won because I wanted to see Matthew Stafford and Odell Beckham get a ring. But I thought the game was good. The one gripe I have about the game is that basically the referees let both teams play the entire game all the way up until 2 minutes left. And then they just started throwing a bunch of penalty flags. But other than that, I thought it was a solid game. I thought maybe there could have been a little bit more action considering how explosive both offenses are. Yep. But I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it started off a lot more exciting, but the middle of that game had the last time the Rams were in the Super Bowl against Patriots had a lot of a similar feel to that type of game where neither offense is moving the ball very well. And then you had the young coach in this instance, it was Zach Taylor, and not really knowing what to do in that situation. Oh my God, I'm leading in the Super Bowl and it's the end of the third quarter. What am I going to do? I'm going to Kyle Shanahan this thing up. I'm going to just call the opposite of what's been working because I've probably just tortured myself over the last 2 weeks since that game ended and listening to sports opinions that I like. And Mark Schlereth has a local station out here in Denver. He's on the morning show and he's watching the all 22. And he's like, they go in with 13 personnel. It's 14 yards a carry for Joe Mixon for the Bengals. They could have done that the entire second half and been just fine, but they wanted to have their three-headed monster receiver show out. Yep. So they, left the bad offensive line on an island pass blocking, and Aaron Donald and Von Miller made them pay. So there's a lot that ended up going wrong down the stretch, but refereeing was pretty much, it stood out right away because the penalties that they missed on the Bengals, I'll throw that out there first, but then on that pass interference, quote unquote penalty on Logan Wilson, 4 out of 5 offensive linemen jumped off sides before that. I think the only one that didn't move was the center. It would have just been nice to have a consistent feel throughout the entire game. If the Bengals still lose in that situation, that feels a lot better than you call a pass interference when I've seen a guy yank a dude's helmet off and not get called, plus everybody jumped off sides. What's going on here? Did you guys have late action on the game? Did you take the second half under? What's going on?
Yeah, I was going to ask you, if there is even really anything to ask about that whole T. Higgins, the face mask, but I will say that I was incredibly for it because I had a very nice line of T. Higgins going over 100 yards and a touchdown. So when he caught that 75-yard touchdown, I went over both of those, and I was very excited about that. But in terms of actual integrity of a football game, that was a pretty bad call or no call.
Right. It was
So,
it was bad on both sides, and the worst part about it too, like that matchup, Andrew Whitworth was the left tackle for the Bengals. Like he was our Joe Thomas for a very long time.
yeah.
So, am I mad to see him finally win a championship? No. Would I have rather him stuck it out and be in the god awful years that we had leading up to getting Joe Burrow and finally turning things around? I would like it, but it's definitely not realistic. So there were storylines on both sides that made me kind of iffy about who I was obviously rooting for the Bengals, but it was difficult because those guys deserve to win just as much as the Bengals deserve to win. Now, I'm really hoping against hope that we don't get a Dan Marino situation because what Joe Burrow did this season, I saw the stat. He's the most recent guy to throw for 4,000 yards in a season, 30 touchdowns, and have a 70% completion percentage. And Aaron Rodgers in 2020, when he won his first of back-to-back MVPs, was the other guy that was most recent. So obviously they got something cooking.
Yeah.
It ain't hard to figure out what they need. So if you've done the Bengals, you mind giving us a sneak peek as to who they drafted?
I have actually. I was going to get into that in a couple minutes, but what I wanted to say, the first thing is that regardless of how old Andrew Whitworth is, you definitely could have used him on the line. He could be 50 and you could probably use him on the line. That line is absolutely atrocious. And I'll be the first one to admit that going back to when I really started covering draft topics in 2020, but then last year is really when I got like really interested in it. I started watching more film. Like I started formulating really my own opinions on prospects instead of just kind of relying on what Mel Kiper and Daniel Jeremiah say, because that's a terrible way to formulate an opinion, especially with Mel Kiper. But
unless you have your pumpkin pie slice for the day.
But yeah, like last year I kept saying to myself, I was like, I know that in my heart, because I'm an old school type of football fan. Like the game is won in the trenches. It'll always be won in the trenches, in my opinion. And I was thinking, regardless of how good Joe Burrow is, regardless of how good T. Higgins is, Tyler Boyd, Joe Mixon, I was like, they need an anchor on that offensive line. And I was hoping that they were going to draft Penei Sewell, and they didn't. And they went with Jamar Chase. And obviously in the long run, it looks that much better because, you know, Joe Burrow got sacked 70 times in total throughout the entire season, but they made it to the Super Bowl, and Jamar Chase had one of, if not the best rookie seasons of all time, you know?
Yeah, there's good. I mean, you couldn't really go wrong with either take, because if the Bengals drafted Penei Sewell, I don't think that they have a playoff run or come close to winning the division, but you can look at the roster and go, well, they got some pick. Now you get to add weapons in this draft. Yes, you missed out on what could be one of the best receivers of this generation, but we can still build and kind of get through there. My biggest thing, Nico had talked me into finally shifting over to draft Jamar Chase before draft day. And I'm a former offensive lineman. I was like, you got to solidify the trenches. If you don't have a left tackle we saw what happened. Joe Burrow's knee is in 3 different pieces right now because they don't have an offensive line. So that's where I started. I came full circle. My biggest thing was they missed on being able to get Tevin Jenkins in round 2. He ended up getting drafted 5 picks before. That's who I really wanted. Just the attitude that he played with at Oklahoma State. He plays in a position that you need. Even if he can't play tackle right away, you put him in at guard and you can run the football between the 2 guards. Because, you know, everything else besides the tackle and the right guard were fairly solid. So that was my biggest thing about that. But, yeah, I think that you can go either way on the fact that they should have drafted Penei Sewell. Either way, like, we saw what happened when they drafted Jamar Chase. Is it going to be that much worse? No, maybe not. I mean, this offseason definitely is a seismic shift depending on what choice you made at that level of the draft.
Yeah, I'll be the first one to say that I actually did it recently. I think it wasn't too long ago at all. It was 6 days ago. I did the Bengals, and my first 2 picks were offensive linemen. I think regardless of I've seen a lot of people in the comments say oh my God, one of my favorite comments, you'll probably get a kick out of this, was this guy goes, listen, this is what I want to propose to you. And I'm a big believer in always replying to comments, whether it's stupid, whether it's good. I think that just getting other people's perspective is like a really good way of having good football conversations. And, you know, you never know, you might make a friend or two, who knows? But this guy goes, let me tell you what I would do if I was the front office. And he says, the first thing I would do is trade my first and third round pick for Laremy Tunsil. And I was like, all right, we're already off to a bad start. And then he goes, then I would sign Teron Armstead, and then I would sign Brandon Sheriff. And then what there was another one that he said, another tackle. And I was like, okay, great. And I was like, who's playing guard? Who's playing center? He was like, get rid of the rest of the linemen. And he was like, whoever loses the tackle battle, that's how you put inside. And I said, okay. I said, so where are you getting the money? He goes, the Bengals have plenty of cap space. I said, okay. So next year, when a lot of big contracts hit, I was like, where are you getting the cap space next year? And the guy was like, we'll worry about that when it comes to it. And I was like, you got it, buddy. I was like, okay.
You definitely don't fix offensive line play through free agency, because the best offensive linemen that you would trade for in free agency, they get second and third contracts. Yep. They don't hit the free agent market unless you get a situation like an Andrew Whitworth, where a guy put in 10 years in a terrible situation. Oh, no. We don't need to be fixing the offensive line through free agency at all. I mean, our free agent acquisition on the offensive line this year didn't finish the season. He was injured. Riley Reif.
Yeah.
What a difference he would have made in that playoff run in general, because they probably don't give up 9 sacks against Tennessee. And I doubt they give up 7 in the second half of the Super Bowl.
That's what I
everybody can have an opinion. It doesn't mean everybody should share their opinion.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that one was definitely one I could have went without seeing, but at the same time, I just like, this might sound mean, I don't know if it does or not, but sometimes I love those comments the most, because I really get a gauge of like what someone's really thinking or how they think that football works.
Yeah, where you can kind of compare your own knowledge or your own opinions. Like, do I sound like this? Should I sound a little bit more like this? Yeah. There's definitely some guys, like, people out there can be on point and have their ducks in a row. Mm-hmm. More often than not, those guys aren't going to be leaving a comment. Like, they'll just take their opinion and give it out to their friends. The people who are writing the comment normally just think the first thing that comes out into their head. They're like, this. And you're like, no, that doesn't work. What are you talking about?
I mean, like, first off, well, the one thing that he said in a comment back that I was like, all right, was he goes, well, if you think about it, the Bengals' first and third round picks are really second and fourth round picks. And I was like, okay. I was like, I guess, like, not too far off. And then but then I said, where are you getting the money? Because the way that the NFL works now is you're not signing a good offensive tackle in free agency if it's not anywhere between $16 to $20 million a year. And you could almost say the same thing goes with guard, because of Joe Tooney's contract last year with the Chiefs. It basically reset the market. And then the cheapest offensive lineman you're going to get is a center, who still, a good center could probably cost you about $12 to $15 million a year. So if you're building your offensive line through free agency, you're in 40% of your cap is going to be in 5 players.
And we're definitely going to expect this from the cheapest organization in professional football.
Oh my God.
Like, we all know the storyline going into the game was this would be the first team to win a Super Bowl in the modern era without an indoor practice facility. So we think that they're going to spend $16 million on 3 separate free agent offensive line contracts. No, they're definitely going to build through the draft. My issue with that is they don't employ a draft staff, like a decent enough scouting staff to know who they should draft. So we might get another Billy Price situation when they do draft offensive linemen. But it's obvious that they could either go the way of those Dolphin teams with Dan Marino, or they could be back here and pull off, be the team that everybody is thinking that they can be. As a Bengals fan, for as long as I have been, I'm just going to resign myself to the fact that they're going to screw something up and be pleasantly surprised, just the way that I did this season. Because I said they're going to win 7 games. When their over-under total came out at 4.5, I was like, they're winning more than 4.5 games.
Yeah.
There's no way that they're going to lose. They're going to get to 4, and then they're going to win, like, steal a couple, 3 games. I did not expect 10-7. So I was pleasantly surprised with 10-7 in a division championship. So now I'm just going to, expect that they be a wild card team and be pleasantly surprised with whatever else they put out there.
Yeah. I mean, I'll I actually like admitting when I'm wrong more than admitting when I'm right. And I was dead wrong about the Bengals. I actually had them, I think at the beginning of the year, I had them going like 6-11, only because my main concern was the offensive line, where I was like, if Joe Burrow has a 0.8 of a second to throw the football, he's never going to be able to get the ball off. And then it turned out that he had a fabulous year.
Jamar Chase, here's the thing. It ended up coming back to bite them in the Super Bowl because Jamar Chase had Jalen Ramsey on his face on like 3 or 4 different plays, but Burrow was getting sacked when it counted. So
yeah,
it makes sense. And the fact, like, this is the first time that the Bengals have swept the Ravens and the Steelers in the same season since I think 2004. So as you sit there and look at the Bengals schedule coming into this year, you're like, they're gonna at best split every single team in their division because the AFC North is good. The AFC North has 3 really good teams and 3 really good quarterbacks, especially when you look at some of these other divisions. Like the 3 other quarterbacks in the AFC North are starters on almost 3 out of 4 teams in the AFC South at least. And that was a team that had the number 1 team in the conference, or a division that had the number 1 team in the conference. So there's definitely arguments to be made on both ends.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me ask you a question. I didn't get to ask you this. How, you're in Colorado. How did you become a Cincinnati Bengals fan?
It is probably like as dumb a reason as you can get, but like I was like 4 or 5 and my dad we always had football on Sundays, no matter what, whether it was Broncos or not. And I liked the Tiger stripes initially, and I liked the uniform combination. And then I turned like 5 or 6, and that was when Carson Palmer had his run and tore his ACL in the wild card. Thanks for bringing that back. That old wound back up against the Steelers even. Yeah, that was really where it was solidified. I love Carson Palmer and Rudy Johnson and Hushmanzada. And then it was even, I like doubled down again in that 2015 run where Vontaze Burfict scrambled Antonio Brown's brain. When I tell you I almost had to take a week off of school, I had talked myself into that big of a hole. It was that bad. Like I showed up Monday and just nobody had to say anything. I was already giving myself the hardest time that anybody else could. And everybody like, wow, this guy is a Bengals fan for no reason, but at least he's sticking to it. So,
yeah. Oh man. Thanks by the way, because, Vontaze Burfict not only ruined Antonio Brown's career, but he ruined his life too. Now he's hanging out with Kanye West and
pulling out MRIs stating like, this is what proves my case. And they're like, MRIs from 4 months ago, dude. That's not the incident you were talking about. Oh man.
You know what was funny? My friend was at the game that he walked off the field. And he texted me. I was actually watching the game on TV. I got up to go to the bathroom and at the worst time because that's when it happened. So I came back and he called me like 3 times and texted me like 5 or 6 times. And I said, well, like he's at the game. What could he possibly be talking about? And I opened it up and he said, oh my God, why did Antonio Brown walk off the field with his shirt off? And I was like, is this guy high? I'm like, what is he talking about?
You're at the game. Like, what are you?
So I was like, what are you talking about? And then I saw the replay and that was just total debauchery. It was.
I thought you were about to tell me you knew the guy that picked him up from the stadium because that was some local New Yorker that's a major driver for one of the agencies up there. I was like, oh, don't tell me. Like you're buddies with the guy who picked him up from the stadium, aren't you?
I just hope that Antonio Brown gave that Lyft driver a 5-star rating. That's all I hope.
It was, talk about picking the best place to lose your mind or the worst place to lose your mind. How is it being there? Is the New York, because being outside of New York, all you hear about is like how terrible the New York media is and how unfair, like ruthless they are with their athletes. Is it as bad as we perceive it to be, or is it like tame? Being a guy that lives there, is it kind of tame compared to what we think it is?
So yes and no, because when the Yankees were the evil empire and they were dominating the back page of, the New York Post and the Daily News and everything, like media was so hard on the Yankees. And then like you'd see the Mets would get no love whatsoever. Like the Mets were never on the back page. And I'm not even trying to be like funny, like, oh, the Mets are so inferior. But like, even when the Mets had a game years ago where they made like 7 errors in one game. and the Yankees lost like 1-0 that day. And it was like, oh my God, the Yankees are on a 5-game losing streak. I'm like, the Mets just had like the worst defensive game in baseball history. And you know what I'm saying? It's case by case. The Giants get run through the mud. The Jets get run through the mud. And the Yankees get run through the mud a lot. The Knicks, everyone basically expects the Knicks to be bad. So the Knicks are the New York darling. Like that's that team that even though they go like 17-56, you're like, it's okay. Like you tried, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
like,
they're the teenager that you're enabling to stay in the house. Like now, if you get in trouble again, we're going to kick you out.
And it just never happens.
Yeah. You always get in trouble and it's always the same speech that you give yourself.
Yeah, like the whole thing with Kemba Walker that came out today that like, oh, he's injured, so he's going to sit out the rest of the year. Like there'll be nothing tomorrow on the back. You know what? I'm going to send you the back page of the paper tomorrow. And I guarantee you it's a little strip on the bottom that says Kemba Walker out for the rest of the season. And that's basically what it is. So I would say it's calmed down recently, like in the last couple of years.
There's other stuff to fight over now in the media, especially in New York. So
yeah, you realize how kind of arbitrary it all is when you think about the bigger picture. But there's still some times where a lot of teams get ran through the mud, but for the most part, it's pretty tame. Like there was like the Daily News at some points was like, I must see the back page. I got to see what that's all about. Now it's like, who gives a shit? You know,
it's interesting just because Denver's not a small media market, but just comparatively trying to look at the side, there's not even really a comparison that you could. One like neighborhood paper probably is half as busy as the national media out here, and that's just the way that things are. Things are busy in New York. There's a lot of people there, a lot of things going on. So yeah, you picked a good city to be born and raised in to have a podcast that you have to generate content for. Speaking,
never run out.
I'm very, very positive that you probably don't. Speaking of which, what's like the thing that's sticking in your craw the most? What's the thing that you're like, you haven't been able to express your feelings on it, but you're like, is it your Knicks possibly making a run in the East for the Eastern Conference? Is it the Jets like not being able to get out from underneath the Namath curse? What do you got like take wise? And give us a hot take so that we have something to clip for like a video later on.
I'll give you a hot take right now that no one likes to hear, especially from a Jet fan. But I firmly believe that with good drafting this year and impact players for the first 3 rounds, I think the Jets could easily be a wild card team this year. Like easily, they could turn it around on a similar anecdote like the Bengals did, but not to that degree. You know what I mean? Like I don't expect like a Super Bowl caliber, run. But I will say that there's immense pressure on the front office of the Jets this year because now it's really no excuses. Like 2 years ago was Joe Douglas's first draft class. Like it was okay. We got a couple good starters out of it, and then a couple unforeseen things like Cameron Clark, like our 4th round guard that was supposed to be a starter at some point, had to retire because he had a spinal cord injury. Like there's some things that you can't like control. Last year, I honestly think in terms of production throughout an entire draft class, I think the Jets had probably a top 5 draft class because there were points throughout the season where the Jets rookies were far and away the best players on the team. Like they were the high impact players. Like you think of Elijah Moore, you think of Michael Carter, Zach Wilson coming back from injury, having less offensive line wise and weapon wise, playing his best football of that season. And now you have statistically the second highest graded pick selection in NFL history, which I don't really know how they grade pick selections.
But, I didn't even know that was a stat.
Yeah, and they literally had the Jets as the second highest pick selection grade of all time, I guess, since that stat was taken. But, they have 4 picks inside the first 38. Right then and there, you can get 4 day 1 starters that could be, it is the Jets, so we'll probably get none, but you can get 4 high-level day 1 starters. And then what I've noticed about the Jets, especially recently under Joe Douglas, is don't count out those late round picks. Mm-hmm. A lot of the guys that Joe Douglas have drafted, like in the later rounds, have been the high impact stars. You think of Bryce Hall, who has been one of the bright spots on the Jets defense the past couple of years. And you think of Jason Pinnock, who played really well towards the end of the year. You think of Brendan Eccles, Michael Carter II, the slot cornerback. There's a lot of guys in the back end of the draft that he drafts really well. So I think if they can get the best draft class this year under Joe Douglas and pair that with a few good signings, because Joe Douglas doesn't really like to spend a lot of money and he doesn't like to give out long-term contracts. But I'm looking at guys like if they could make a run at maybe Brendan Sheriff and then at Marcus Williams at safety, because I know for a fact that Jesse Bates will not hit free agency. Well, he's not going to.
You say that, but that's a lot of money that they're going to have to pony up for him. And I will tell you, like, half of Bengals media and half of like Bengals fandom are not wanting him back because he had an up and down regular season, even though he had a 90 all the way throughout the playoffs. They're like, he had an up and down regular season. He's not worth it. I was like, shut up. You don't know what you're talking about. Continue.
But I think that if they can I am like, a lot of people say, so you look at teams that always have a lot of cap space. So you look at the Jaguars are always up there. The Browns for a long period of time were always up there in cap space. The Chargers were up there in cap space for a long time too. And this year they have the most cap space. That's not a good thing, having the most cap space every single year, because you look at how bad the Browns, like every year I was like, how do the Browns have $80 million in cap space? Because they were terrible. So like the same thing with the Jets, like the Jets for the past 6 years, I can't remember since 2015. I can't remember a time where the Jets had under about $65 million in cap space. You know what? If that takes you spending $55 million of that cap space paired with your draft class, and then you have a winner or you at least make the playoffs, totally okay with that. We don't need to have $50+ million in cap space every single year. I mean, there are teams, look at what did the Chiefs have? $5 million in cap space last year, and then they signed Joe Thuney to an $80 million deal.
And the defending Super Bowl champions the last 2 years have both circumvented the salary cap to make sure that they have a team good enough to win. Because I mean, the way that things are structured now, that's pretty much what you have to do. You have like a 2-year stretch where you can get a guy on a contract where the money doesn't hit until the second year, and you're like, I'm rolling the dice. Here we go. Let's try and make this thing happen. I can see that out of the Jets. I would sit here and say that that's not out of the realm of possibility, mainly because I trust your coach. Like, I haven't been able to say that about the Jets head coach for a long time, but Robert Saleh, I was standing on the table last season for the Bengals to fire Zach Taylor and hire Robert Saleh. Like, a guy that's available now. I didn't think that Taylor had the culture that he had obviously generated, but you got a guy that can build a culture that's not going to have Greg Williams blitz your rookie quarterback 55 times a practice and have him totally scared on Sundays.
No.
Zach Wilson, he definitely has a lot of ups. I would say Zach Wilson probably has the potential to be a better quarterback than Mac Jones does. Mac Jones is probably about as good as he's going to be. He might get a little bit better, but he's not going to be overly great. Zach Wilson has the talent to be really special if he's in the right situation. So I agree with you there. And, when the Jets won games and I had to sit there and watch them beat the crap out of the Bengals for an afternoon, they just they came out with like that hard hat mentality. Like, who are you? Yeah, I don't care. I'm going to punch you in the face, and we'll see if you want to fight back, you're going to be able to overtake us. But if I punch you in the face and you back down, that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, and that's what Robert Saleh brings to the table. I mean, like, I knew going into the season, I actually had a guy who runs like a big Jet Media Twitter account, and he actually has his own website and everything. And it's pretty popular. I had him on my podcast before the season started, and he was sitting here, spewing information, all kind of stats, and he was like, "There's no reason why the Jets shouldn't win 8 or 9 games this year." And I was like, I just can't see it, man. I was like, I kept going, like, I felt like an ass because I was just like, I just can't see it. But I'm not going to sit here and agree with you and say, yeah, I could see the Jets winning 9 games with the roster that they had, with a rookie quarterback, and especially the way that the rookie quarterback looked the first 4 games of the year. So, like, now if he comes on this year and he's like, there's no reason the Jets shouldn't win 10 games, then I'm going to get behind that because, the one thing that bothers me about the way that Zach Wilson played at the end of the year was that this is a very similar feeling to 2018 Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold was pretty awful throughout his entire rookie season. And then the last 4 weeks of the year, he set the world on fire, and he gave the Jet fans a lot to look forward to. And then he basically never got better. That 4-game span was the best he ever played. And then he just kind of plateaued. But I think what was encouraging is that Sam Darnold did have all his weapons around him when that happened, and Zach Wilson had none, and he still played pretty well. Mm-hmm. So if because Elijah Moore didn't play, Michael Carter was only back for the last 2 games. Corey Davis was out. Basically, Mekhi Becton was out for the whole year. So that's your blindside blocker. Mm-hmm. There was a lot of factors that played into the Jets being bad, but Zach Wilson still played well under those circumstances. So it does make me feel better that he didn't have anyone and he played that well, but also I can't help but think in my Jet brain, it feels a little bit like Sam Darnold.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have it in front of me offhand, but just thinking about it, Zach Wilson didn't play too much worse than Josh Allen played in his rookie season. Like, if I remember correctly, Josh Allen had a lot of moments where you're like, damn, that guy could play football, and a lot of moments where you're like, this is why you went to Wyoming and you had no offers coming out of college. You have both sides. So if I think Wilson's at like a impasse to where he's going to be Sam Darnold 2.0, or he could maybe show a little bit more of that talent that we're seeing. And for your sake, for my brother's sake, I hope that they start showing that. I don't think that they play, like, if we do play the Jets, it'll be a one-off. It's not a every year thing. So I don't mind if the Jets are good.
I think we're playing each other again this upcoming season.
Good, because we need a rematch after the schoolyard beatdown that you guys gave us this past season. It was ridiculous. Like, Nico was so mad at me because he was doing this season long. Like, you pick one winner, you lock in one winner and try and go the season long. He's like, Bengals play the Jets. Obviously, it's a lock for your team. I was like, yeah, sure, why not? Let's go with that. And didn't hear the end of it. No, but so I don't take up too much of your time. I know you got to record your own show and everything like that. Now that the Super Bowl has ended, you've been talking about your draft stuff. Obviously, you pay attention to the Knicks and pay attention to the NHL in general. How are you going to be passing your time kind of in this portion of the sports calendar where we're in between the Super Bowl and March Madness and the playoffs kind of starting? What it's going to be your main focus over these next few weeks before the tournament gets going?
As a fan, I love March Madness. I can't really I don't want to say I don't know enough about college basketball, but I just don't know enough about all the teams to really go in depth. That's one thing. I'm not going to make a show and clickbait it where I'm like, yeah, I know all this stuff. And then if I don't know everything about, 68 teams, if I don't know every single thing about 68 teams, I'm not doing it. But I will watch and I'll love it. I'll love every minute of it like I do every single year. My main priority right now is once hopefully the MLB situation gets figured out, then I'm going to be covering the MLB a lot more. But right now, my main focus in terms of something that's set in stone is the NFL draft. And I mean, people just eat up that content. People just love that dream scenario of you know what I mean? Of something that's never going to happen. That's one of my things that I always say where I'm like, where we're arguing in the comment section about, the Jets are going to take, Akeem Ekwonu at number 4, and they're going to wind up with Kyle Hamilton. We're ranting and raving about things that we know nothing about, but that definitely is my main focus right now, is just getting that series done. And then I'm probably going to take a little bit of a break once the 32nd team is done because, got a lot going on with work and stuff and kind of burned out. So, once that's done, I'm going to take it from there. I just take it 1 month at a time, see what's in front of me, and I'll just focus on that for now.
It's the way you got to do it. I will say, be on the lookout. You follow us just like everybody should, and everybody should follow you on social media as well. I'll give you a chance to plug all your pages and everything one more time before we wrap things up. We did a bracket challenge last year for March Madness. We are going to be doing it again, except we're smarter this time. I'm going to make it so that you can submit one bracket, and we're going to have a gift card on the line. So
hey.
kind of hinted at that in the episode that people were able to hear earlier on this week. We will be putting out, it'll be either $150 to $250 gift card on the line for the winner. So you should get involved. You should tell friends of yours to get involved. I hope that, we had given away a t-shirt last year for our winner. So we had a lot of people excited about it last year. This year, with people actually being able to go, and we're going to have kind of that March Madness feel again. I'm sure we'll have more content coming out surrounding that, but wanted to get that in front of you. And once again, thank you for your time, and tell people where they can find your content, where they should be looking to try and get more of the PTV Sports Network.
Yeah, this is literally the worst part of every time that I'm on a different. I plug myself so horribly because I never remember anything. But if you're looking for draft content of all 32 teams from now up until the NFL draft and beyond, find me PTV Sports Network on YouTube. If you're looking for the podcast on all streaming platforms, PTV Sports Podcast. On Instagram, I am at PTV Sports Network, and then Twitter, PTV Sports Posts. So that's where you can find me. I post a lot on Instagram, but I'm not really that active there. As you know, I'm pretty active on Twitter. So that's the best place to reach me if you want to reach out and talk. So Jimmy, man, thank you so much for having me on. This was a lot of fun.
It was. I listening to your show, like I knew we were going to have the New York connection, and then seeing your email and your last name, I was like, wow, another Italian, like a kindred spirit. And I knew how to pronounce your name off the bat without even.
That was the best. That was the best part of it.
There you go. And I didn't even have to bring up the fact that I have an Italian stallion tattoo, but there we go. Yeah. Don't ever go with like a Rocky t-shirt on. You're going to think that you want to get that tattooed on you. Anyways, I can't thank you enough for your time and your insight. Hopefully all of our listeners will go check out your show and your pages as well. I really enjoy listening to your podcast. But once again, Peter Andrisani of the PTV Sports Network, thank you very much for joining us here on the Far End of the Bench podcast. Everybody else, be sure to follow at FEOTV Pod, subscribe to our YouTube channel, listen for new episodes every single Wednesday, and we will catch you guys on the next time.